A few years ago, almost 4.5 years ago, in fact, one of the largest pieces of domestic legislation passed by the federal government came to be, the Affordable Care Act. Many court battles, many fights, political dealings and bickerings back and forth. It'll still take a few years to find out if this law is going to be effective. I'm still not a huge fan of it because I'm concerned whether the Affordable Care Act will indeed make health insurance affordable. Part of the Affordable Care Act were health insurance exchanges. The federal one, which had all kinds of problems and it launched last year, and states could do their own individual exchanges. Minnesota was one of those that chose to do its own individual exchange. And while it seemed to have less problems than the federals, it still had a lot of problems, and MNsure has had tons of issues since. Hopefully we've got a lot of the bugs worked out, but it took millions and millions of dollars more than originally thought. And Governor Dayton himself has said that this is his baby. He was the governor that opted us into the state health care exchange. Governor Tim Pawlenty, this is how far back the Affordable Care Act actually goes when it's passed originally. Governor Tim Pawlenty was here. He was the governor. He was not running for re-election, and he intentionally left the decision of what Minnesota would do on that to the next governor, knowing that he was not running for re-election. He would not be here to preside over it. Governor Dayton won. It was the very first thing he did right after he was sworn into office was to hop us into MNsure, the Affordable Care Act, the state-run exchange. I digress now. Going back to last year, the state's healthcare exchange numbers came out. Minnesota was lucky. We actually had the lowest rates in the nation when it came to the healthcare exchange. However, that still meant people that were younger were paying much more for premiums and paying for things they didn't want. It still meant lots of people were kicked off their health insurance plans that liked their insurance plans despite whatever promises the Democratic Party made who passed this piece of legislation. Remember, this was all Democratic votes that passed the health care law. But now we come to this year. Just last week now, the newest rates came out for the healthcare exchange for Minnesota. While the good news is Minnesota is still going to have the lowest rates apparently in the country, the bad news is we're seeing a 4.5% increase statewide, which actually isn't that bad. But if you live in the Twin Cities metro, you're looking at an 18 to 37% increase. If you paid about $90 for a low premium plan last time, this time you're probably going to pay closer to $110. And these new rate numbers come out just 2 weeks after Preferred One, the largest of the insurance providers in the MNsure exchange, privately I should say, private insurance companies, has said they're opting out of it. This year, people will still be able to have their plans if they bought preferred plans last year. But they need to buy a new one this year for next year. Always buying a year ahead is the way this thing's going to work. Open enrollment's going to begin soon. People are going to have to be able to talk to their different persons and exchanges. But the reality is that this is going up, and it's still going to go up hard. And I don't know when it's going to stop, when it's going to hit the ceiling, when it's going to be quote-unquote affordable. We spent over $3 million last year on top of what we've already spent in the tens of millions on this healthcare exchange to make it better. Now one of the leading providers in it has basically thrown their hands up and said it's too much of a headache. We don't want to deal with it. The largest majority of people on the healthcare exchange have actually jumped onto Medicaid, Medicare, different types of government-run health insurance. Very few people have jumped on the private, and we still have almost 500,000 Minnesotans that have not signed up for health insurance yet, and they're going to be paying more and more money and penalties this year. We're also going to see a potential shift starting next year because a lot of the subsidies for state-run exchanges like ours are going to go out from the federal government, which means the state is going to start holding on to more of the premium money. When that happens, will we see even a sharper increase next year? Well, only time will tell, but that seems to be the unaffordable part of the Affordable Care Act. Healthcare is still going up every single year.